The Giant at the Gates. A long time ago in Cyprus, sometime after the Greeks but before the British, there was a king who had fought long and hard to bring peace to his land. And even though he still lived in a great fortress at the top of a hill, surrounded by a huge wall, the gate in that wall was always open so that his people could come in and go out. But one day, as the king was having his breakfast, people were running around and screaming, and he looked out the window and he's heard a sound that he had not heard in years. It was the gate slamming shut. "What's happening?" cried the king out the window, and a messenger raced up the stairs. Your Majesty, there's at the gates, it's saying he's going to eat everyone in town. He's going to destroy the entire..." Yeah, but what is it? A giant, Your Majesty, a giant! A giant. Yes, Your Majesty. Have you forgotten about all the giants that we fought when we were younger? I mean, we practically ate them for breakfast. In fact, I think I have a finger in my cereal right here. Come on, a giant is nothing. My bravest warrior can take care of him, can't you? Of course, said the bravest warrior. And so the bravest warrior put on his armor and took down his sword from off the wall and marched, with all the people cheering on the sides of the streets, and the gate opened up, and the bravest warrior marched straight out to meet that giant. You see, the giant was a bit gianter than he had expected. This wasn't just a very, very tall man. No. This was an actual giant. I mean, this giant's head was even higher than that tree right there. And the bravest warrior was very brave, but he was human after all, and his knees trembled and his legs shook, and he didn't mean to. It just kind of happened. He took one step back, and the giant took one step forward and grew even bigger. Oh, hell no! He was safe. Well, the king realized that maybe this giant was too much for his bravest warrior. No shame in that. You need to learn how to pick your battles after all, but certainly it would be no match against his entire army. And so the king gathered all his army, and all the king's soldiers took their armor and put it back on, and took their swords from off the walls and marched to face that giant. Because by now, that giant had grown so big that he looked down at the soldiers as if they were just little mice that he could squish with one foot. And even though these soldiers were very brave and had fought many battles, they were human after all, and their knees trembled and their legs shook, and they didn't mean to. It just kind of happened. They took a step back, and the giant took a step forward and grew even bigger. Oh, hell no! They were safe. And so, the king learned that time-honored lesson. If you want something done properly, you must do it yourself. And so the king put on his armor, and the king took down his sword, and the king marched to face that. Uh-oh. Because by now, the giant was so big that he towered over the city as if the city itself were nothing but a bunch of little ants. And as the king looked up at this giant, he was a very brave man, but he was human after all. and his knees trembled and his legs shook, and he didn't mean to, it just kind of happened. He took a step back, and the giant took a step forward, making the entire mountain tremble and grew even bigger. Oh, hell no! But just as the king was about to race back inside and close the gate, he stopped. Because he knew that if he closed that gate, his people would die of hunger. And slowly, gripping his sword with white knuckles, the king turned around. He knew that that giant was too big. He knew that he and his army and his entire people could not defeat that giant. They had no chance whatsoever. He knew that if he faced that giant, he would die. But he also knew that if he didn't even try, life wasn't worth living. And so, once again, gripping his sword, setting his eyes up on the giant's face, the king made the decision. He had lived a good life. Now he would die a good death. But as he took one step forward, the giant took one step back and grew a little bit smaller. King took another step forward. The giant took another step back and grew even smaller. Oh, so that's how this works. Charge! And the king chased that giant all the way down the hill, all the way across the plains, all the way to the side of the sea. And by the time they got to the ocean, the giant was so small that it could fit in the palm of his hand. "Who are you?" said the king. "I am Fear. Don't kill me. You need me. I can protect you." "Yes, but you will be my servant. I will not be yours." And the king put the giant in his pocket and went back across the plains and up the hill and into his city, where he left the gate open so that his people could come in and go out.